Thank you for joining us wherever you are. This podcast episode is brought to you by the Old Ways Actual Play Team. This actual play uses the Old Gods of Appalachia rules by Monty Cook Games. This actual play is performed by adults and contains adult themes. We welcome you to our hollers and the depths beneath them, but take caution. For all content, including names, places, events, companies, and etc., which may bear resemblance to entities living or from places unknown, is strictly coincidental. My name is Michael Diamond, and for Tonight's Tale, I will be your game master. Thank you for joining us again on another episode of the Old Ways podcast. I am your storyteller this evening, or game master, Michael Diamond. My pronouns are he, him, and we are back with our Old Gods of Appalachia story, which we've dubbed Family Reunion. More on that later. We want to welcome you in. We want to especially appreciate our Patreon supporters. If you've not had a chance to check out what we offer, you can do so at patreon.com/theoldwayspodcast. Now, before I get into the character introductions, I would like to thank our friends at Monty Cook Games for helping develop such an amazing world for us to play in. Of course, I will remind you that while the podcast exists of all this amazing Appalachia story that is stemmed from, our game world is going to be a little different. It's going to have its own idiosyncrasies and elements, and we hope you enjoy them greatly. Now, we'll begin with player introductions to my right.
I'm Bunny. My pronouns are she, her, and I play Ivy Holloway.
Indeed. Ivy got to have a chance to accompany Clara home for this family reunion, and I'm sure that it will be just exciting as all get out. And next, to Ivy.
Hi, my name is Mare, pronouns she, her, and I play Clara Carr.
Welcome home, Clara. And last but most certainly not least.
Hi, I'm Morgan, she, her, and I play Preacher Elijah Carr, he, him. I have a slight drinking problem, and I don't practice what I preach.
Oh, we're going to test that theory, Preacher. Don't you worry about it. We are going to raise the curtain tonight back at the stead, the residence, the collection of Rourke and Carrs who've come together for this family reunion, sitting at this amazingly long picnic table under a beautiful oak tree when something has arisen. Word has gotten out that Charlotte is missing. Charlotte, a girl probably no more than 8 or 9 years old, whose mother, Sarah, and father, John, have been calling her name, looking inside the house, and generally upsetting the, we'll just say, ambiance that dinner had. It's at this point where Granny turns to you, Elijah, and she says, "Come here." She sort of snaps just a little bit with one of her more bony fingers.
Yeah, I amble over.
"How much you had to drink today?"
I put my hand up to my breath. Ain't nothing but a sip or two, Granny.
All right, you listen to me. I need you to go look for Charlotte. I need you to try to find her. She reaches into her pocket and she pulls out a rather strange looking item. This collection of dark teeth sit in her hand, strung together by what looked like perhaps yarn or maybe a bit of brown cord. The teeth aren't human. You've seen enough deer teeth in your day to know what they look like. And there's a smell that comes from the teeth. It almost smells like berries. She tucks it into your hand.
What am I supposed to do with these?
Wear it, she says, sort of matter-of-factly. There's been a string of these things the past few months. Charlotte ain't the first to go missing.
This a string of what?
Teeth. She points to your hand. Yes, and kids gone missing. This must be 4 or 5 now.
Hold up the strand of deer teeth. Why am I wearing this?
She looks over at you, Ivy, and sort of gives you a much more pleasant motion to come forward.
Yes, ma'am?
Would you help him tie that around his neck?
Yeah, of course. And Ivy will launch into doing whatever Granny tells her, tying that around his neck at her beck and call.
It wears just like a necklace around your Elijah. It smells like berries. She puts her two sort of thin fingers in towards your top of your chest. She says, anything comes at you, I swear this necklace will bite them right back.
Okay, if you say so, Granny.
Now, Charlotte liked to play near the city, near the town. She loved to watch the horses and the wagons come and go and watch the trains roll in. If she ain't in the field next door, best be looking towards town for her.
Okay, well, maybe we should just get Clara.
I definitely agree. I'll just need to grab a couple of my things that I put down by the front door, but...
You see the cars and the Rorks. Most of the men begin to fan out around the yard. Lanterns. Nobody seems to be too concerned at this point. Kids play out in the middle of the fields all the time. And it isn't unheard of, especially for the three of you, to remember days when maybe you stayed out a little bit later than you were supposed to. You lost track of time, that sort of thing. And so you collect your things, Ivy, and three of you get a little bit more prepared to head into town. It's just a little past supper time, so the sun isn't really too strong in the sky. It's beginning to crest over the top of some of these trees now, and these long bands of red and rose light are still coming through.
How near town are we?
You're probably more than a few miles, probably about 5, give or take.
Am I allowed to use any skills?
What would you like to do?
I'd like to be able to sense danger.
Given where you're at right now, I will just say that you don't sense anything that is dangerous here.
Okay.
So no real role needed. I mean, you're amongst family, and you have a pretty good feeling here amongst the people who are present.
Cousin Clara, though. We might have to throw her off the cart.
That's a good question. How are you going to get to town?
Oh, I thought we were already in the cart, and Cousin Clara was driving the horses.
Well, she might be, but if that's what you're going to do, there's more than enough horses, and the cart is there. You'd have to just let me know that you're going to hook it up and head to town.
I mean, that does seem like the best way to get closer to where she might be, and then we can always wander the actual woods around there on foot. No need to go on foot the whole way.
Sure. So taking the wagon and the horses back into town is a fairly easy roll. There's no horsemanship or driving required for the wagon. This time there's nothing excitable unless you're choosing to get the horses up and run. So getting back into town takes maybe 10-15 minutes, give or take. Just having to hook the horses up. And again, Tipton is a fairly small town. There's a few rows of buildings. There's the train station, and then there are some buildings on the outer portions of it, like the denim factory and Tipton Steel. Unlike your first trip in earlier today, Tipton has quieted down an awful lot, minus a couple of the late night spots that are open, mostly bars. And there's a bookstore that has a sort of open parlor area where people can sit out and watch fireflies, read books, and enjoy the night. Definitely the probably the only game in town as far as a quiet place.
From the cart, Clara is just looking around, thinking of her own childhood, and if there were any places that she liked going, any little nooks or crannies, or especially knowing that Charlotte enjoys seeing the trains and watching the people. There any particularly good spots for doing that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The train station is chock full of good places to sit and hide away. The porters there probably have loaded a bunch of boxes. The big thing to remember about Tipton as far as its socioeconomic portion is that realistically, the trains run here because coal is needed to fire the steel mill. And so there's a lot of coal that comes off the line here and then gets put down to that Tipton Steel factory. But it's also needed in certain spaces, it's needed to heat stuff for the denim factory as well, King Denim. But there are tons of boxes here where you could, sequester yourself away, sort of put your shoulders back into a hidey hole, get a blanket and a book, and just watch the day pass. And it wouldn't be out of the ordinary to think that Charlotte might do something like that. She is a young girl, and from what you have heard of her just by your mother's letters and whatnot, she's a girl that loves stories. And so she's also a girl that tends to probably get a book or two from Granny every now and again to draw in or to read stories.
Would it have seemed that she had the sort of knack for things from those letters that I picked up from Granny?
Yeah, you think so. Your mother doesn't necessarily have the knack, so to speak. Your mother is someone who is wonderful, is likely more of what we would call a kitchen witch, in the sense that she knows certain, rhymes, and she hums songs when she cooks, and she uses very specific ingredients. Your granny has the knack and can do things. Your mom knows that, but they don't talk about it around, company that's not family. It's probably fairly likely that sort of knack is something that your granny is trying to foster in Charlotte to see if she's got it.
Mm-hmm. And so we'll first make our way to the train station, right? Clara would turn to where they are in the cart. Is she driving?
I'd imagine so.
Yeah. So Clara would turn around to the others in the cart. I think I have a few places I want to look. Some places that a young girl would want to go and watch others. And definitely the train station, but I think we would be remiss not to go by the factories as well. There's all sorts of little hidey holes there. And I just want to check it out. And she gives Ivy that knowing look, kind of like all but a wink with that.
Listen, these are your old stomping grounds. If you think that a little girl might have wanted to go there, then I have no reason to do anything other than follow happily and search as best I can. I'm just going to be going through my pouch a little bit longer to see if I have any tinctures she might need when we find her, poultices. Who knows what kind of, scrapes and injuries little girls can get climbing in places they shouldn't.
Clara grins at that, knowing that she is very much that same kind of girl who gets scraped up doing plenty of things that she shouldn't. She looks back and goes, and past her cousin, I guess you'll keep your nose to the ground? See if you notice anything interesting?
Yes, Cousin Clara. As I get like a stain from whiskey on my shirt. Hey, I do have a question real quick.
Yeah.
So the necklace of teeth I got, is that a charm of retaliation?
It is a charm of retaliation. It is a cipher, so you can write that down. So Granny has given you a cipher, and I can tell you that cipher, the charm of retaliation, is a level 4 cipher. It inflicts 2 points of damage on anyone who attempts to hurt you, and it's not something you have to roll for. It happens automatically. And this is most likely since Granny figures that you're going to be the one that will bumble into something. And so she's protecting you because she knows that maybe you've had a little and will probably have more.
As I pull out my flask.
Holy water at a time like this?
Oh, it's blessed.
So the train station, as you three walk into it, is pretty empty. There are no trains currently waiting here. The porters, for the most part, have gone home for the evening. The train office has a tiny little ember of light inside of it. It's probably from a stove or some other sort of heating element. Not that it's too terribly cold, but if there's anybody working at night, they'll probably need some place to come in and warm up at. But on display before you is a sort of light show. All along the tracks and the platform itself and the really large greenery, this bush that sits just beyond the furthest point of the track, there are scores of fireflies dancing throughout the air. And they're dancing back and forth with something that you're familiar with, and that is a tiger swallowtail. So that is a type of butterfly that exists here in the Appalachian Mountains. Really, really pretty yellows and blacks. And they seem to be moving back and forth and back and forth. And they're doing some sort of strange yet entrancing dance.
Clara would like to watch them for about a minute as a use of her mystic sense.
Ooh, why don't you explain what mystic sense does?
So mystic sense comes from the descriptor of mystical. It says you can sense whether there's something mystical or magical going on in situations where its presence is not obvious. You must study an object or a location closely for a minute to get a feel for whether a mystical touch is at work.
Yeah, you study it for a minute and kind of zero in on some of the things going on. And you think, yes, something mystical is happening here. Like, just to give a little bit more understanding to the situation, there are probably 2 or 3 times the amount of fireflies in the area.
In their back and forth movement, are they gesturing in any kind of way? Do they seem to be indicating a path?
At the moment, what they seem to be doing is more making circles. So there are 2 or 3 distinct, I don't want to say cyclonic, but that's probably the closest adjective, is they seem to be circling in these patterns.
Are there a certain number of cyclones?
3.
There are 3 cyclones. Interesting. I would like to also, so what you guys see Clara do is likely something that Ivy has seen Clara do on multiple occasions when she's in her figuring stuff out mode, where she sits there and she looks at it and squints one way and then looks at it and squints another way. And with this, we're going to use my ability of sense the unseen, or see the unseen.
So again, if you'll indulge me, if you would just explain what see the unseen does.
I shall. See the unseen is one of my abilities as a sage. You automatically perceive creatures and objects that are normally invisible, insubstantial, or hidden via magic.
Automatically, you say?
Yes.
Okay. So does it cost you any pool points to use that ability?
This one does not cost it. It is an enabler, but it is... What's that? And that spooky thing in the corner, I see what it is, and I can determine if I want to tell people.
Okay. So there is a shape behind the large bush. It appears, anyway, a little bit like a collection of sticks and leaves. That's sort of how it appears to your mystical senses. It's as if there is a bush behind this green space, which is radiating some sort of mystical energy.
Is it possible that I would have been familiar with seeing one of these things in my younger years?
It is possible. You'd have to lay eye on it to know for sure.
And it's just kind of more out of that periphery, not quite pinned down. Interesting.
And it is like when you shift your eyes squinting from one to the other, you can watch it almost move back and forth as if it's working real hard not to be seen.
Excellent. Clara sits there, has her arms crossed, and just goes,
I know that sound. I know that look. What's going on, Clara?
There's something in the tree line. It's not... I guess I wouldn't be able to sense, actually, Peepaw. I wouldn't be able to sense whether or not it's benign or anything like that.
You would not.
Okay.
After Clara points out that there's something in the tree line, I'd also like to see the unseen.
Okay, sure. Yeah, again, you get the same sort of vision that she does, which is there is something behind this major... When I talk about like the bush that sits outside the tracks on the other side of the platform, it is large. So I would just say that the range of this bush is probably 12 to 15 feet high, and it's probably 30 or 40 feet long in this stretch. When the tracks were built through here, they likely cut down most of the forest growth that came through, and this is just sort of the edge of that old growth. What you two have seen beyond that old growth is that there is something mystical there. There's an energy that's coming off, and you can see every so often just the lip of this cyclonic activity between the butterflies and the fireflies interact with it. And there's almost like this just light, I guess, kiss that happens between the two things, and then the swirls continue.
You see it too, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, that's real interesting. What do you want to do about it?
Well, it doesn't seem to be doing any big moves now. I think we should first focus on seeing if we can find Charlotte or any evidence of her around here. And then maybe take a look at that.
The three of you hear some cowboy boots. These are definitively cowboy boots that are walking across the platform. They're coming from behind you, because to view this unseen entity, you'd have to be a little bit further into the train station platform. You all hear someone walking up behind you.
Ivy will turn to look.
You see a figure holding a lantern. It is a female figure who's wearing rather stunning jeans, as you probably saw earlier today. She has a cowboy hat on, or that sort of cowboy style hat on, and she walks into the train station. She's wearing a bit of a darker denim shirt. Evening.
Oh, well,
Evening.
Excuse me there, miss. You don't mind if we ask you a couple questions, do you?
Oh, no, I don't mind. I'm happy to be helpful. She walks closer.
Yeah, well, I'm Elijah. It's my cousin Clara.
Mm-hmm.
And her friend Ivy. And we're looking for a little girl named Charlotte. It's one of our cousins from a cousin. You know how that is.
Sure. Charlotte.
It's about yay high. And, blonde hair.
Oh, you mean Sarah's Charlotte? Car child.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw her earlier today. She extends a hand. Jenny Brooks.
Elijah Carr. Pleasure to make your acquaintance.
Mayor Jenny Brooks.
Oh, Mayor. Oh, it is truly a pleasure to meet you.
Finally some sense in this town, then. It's wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
Pleasure to meet you, Miss Mayor.
Yes, I took over a few years ago after, things needed to get done.
So, you mentioned that you saw her earlier today. How much earlier today?
Would have been about midday. Sometimes she comes in here and she sits right up there. She points to like a group of boxes that's probably 3 or 4 crates high. And no doubt, Clara, this is the spot you would have picked. It's perfect. It's got a place to possibly put like, a book, and you could rest it against this piece of the wall, and you could sit up there and no one would know you were there. And you could watch just like a bird down on all these people who came and went.
Excellent. Oh, well, thank you. When did you last see her here? Earlier this morning, this afternoon?
Midday. I was working my way back to the Tanner bookshop after a little reading I had done the night before. I was going to talk with the owner there, Carl, about just opinions. We like to talk back and forth. You understand.
Oh, what kind of books? Part of my trade, what's kept me away from here so long. I'm a bookwoman myself.
Oh, well. The Tipton bookstore that Carl runs is small, but it's just trying to sort of stay alive. Most of the fellows that are coming in and out of here, they're more interested in making what kind of money they can at King Denham or down at the steel mill. But we got a small group of people that occasionally get together once or twice a month, and we read.
And what caught your eye this last time?
There was a book by this fellow named Brooks. And he lives, or used to live, in the Ohio area. And he used to spin some yarns, and he wrote them into this book about things you might see in the woods and in the mountains. Sort of a collection of stories about, things that some folks just don't want to talk about. And the book group, we do talk about them.
Oh, that's just my kind of book. If there are any other copies of that over there at the bookstore, I know I'd love to get my hands on that for my own collection. Maybe I trade a few things of my own this way.
Yeah, Carl might have 1 or 2 left. I mean, if he might still even be open. As far as Charlotte, what's wrong? You looking for her? She missing?
Nobody's seen her since earlier today, which is why I was wondering when you might have seen her, if it was more recent than anyone else. But it's been some hours since anybody's seen the child, so.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've had a couple kids that wandered off the past few months, and it's top of mind for me. So, but if I see her, I'll send her home.
I appreciate it.
That'd be mighty helpful of you. Thank you.
Does she also frequent the bookstore? Or, with you being mayor, do you know any of her other haunts? I know where I would go and hide. Up there's one of them, but...
Well, I know that she has taken to a tree that is just south of town. And she's taken to it because it's just got enough cover that she can sit in it, and she can read, and she can pass the time without any of the boys being able to get into it. It's probably 5-10 minute walk out of town. She might be there, but with the light going, I figured she'd been home.
Where were these other kids disappearing from? From different houses?
She gets a little closer to the 3 of you. It's not much for pleasant conversation, you understand, but we've had some kids get into the woods and go missing. We look and look and look, and the Teller family had a kid that, poor boy. Well, this was a couple weeks ago. He went missing, and they found him. Must have been, I don't know, just in the middle of the night when they found him. Brought him back to the house. The next day, he wandered off again.
Did they find him?
Not the second time. And so we check. Go to the town and check the orphanage. We talk to the people there. There's a lot of kids down there. And so we figured maybe he'd end up there. It's real sad. Tipton's small, you know.
Well, that young teller boy, where'd they find him the first time?
Well, they found him down by the steam mill. It ain't uncommon for kids to go play down by the mill. It's a big building. Sometimes it makes a bunch of smoke. There's a river down near there. But it doesn't run all the time anymore. It's hit or miss.
Still sounds like somewhere we want to check.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Brooks. And just curious, that book of yours, no relation, right?
None at all. She smiles,
All right.
picks the lantern up, and walks on out.
I will lean close to Clara and say, I like her. I think I like her a lot.
I know. Imagine if I'd stayed here. Mayor Clara. It kind of has a nice ring to it. And looks over to Elijah. Then you'd call me, Cousin Mayor.
Or Mayor Cousin.
Mayor Cousin. Yep, you know what? Sometimes getting them switched up. Trying to figure it out. It's got a nice ring to it. You got to figure out which one goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So to the mill, and probably down by the river, or to the tree first. Which one would be closer for us?
Well, the mill is south of town, so it stands to reason that if you were to head south towards the steel mill, you'd probably pass this tree that the mayor talked about.
Absolutely. Well, let's get back in the cart. Try and do this. We're burning whatever last little dregs of daylight we got.
You certainly do. The ride down south of town is on a fairly well-developed path. I won't call it a road, because certainly that's not what it is. But there are an awful lot of wagons that run down towards the mill, and so it has sort of beaten up the ground enough to where you can kind of make a reasonable path out of it. It's at this point really where most of the daylight will have left you. And so for, we'll just say, luck's sake, I'd like you to make a wagoneering roll. So we'll say that it's a difficulty 3 test. And the reason why you're making this test is because it's a little dark.
Okay, I've got myself a technical question here. What exactly am I rolling for a wagoneering roll?
The challenge rating is 3. Is there anything that you're going to try to use to lower it?
And this wagoneering roll is due to it being dark, or is it due to it? Definitely due to it being dark. Okay.
If I had a lantern out, would that help?
That would be great, as if we could have a lantern. Someone got one?
There's likely a lantern with one of you or in the wagon, and so if it is used, you could use it as an equipment asset, which would lower the difficulty.
I'll hold it since I'm sitting up next to her while she's driving. So point it at the road.
So that'll lower the challenge by 1, so it's 2, so you need a 6 or better on a d20.
All right. I have a 10 on the d20.
Okay. There is definitely some work that you have to put in. You have to sort of look ahead and outsmart the horses, which some people might say is not that hard, but these horses, they're going to be a little bit concerned about moving around in the dark. That said, about 10 minutes or so later, you come to a tree. It's just by the path here, and there's another, we won't call it a road, but path that sort of interdicts this space. So you find the tree. There it is on the left-hand side. It is a beautiful, thick oak, and there is quite the canopy above it. It's probably 40 feet tall. It's a little surprising for that big of a tree to be left to its own devices here by the trail, by these 2 different roads, but it's possible that folks in Tipton maybe just used it as a waypoint along the path, something that's natural and easy to see. You're going to stop and take a look at it?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. All right. You get out, each of you. Take a look around the tree. You see that some of the lower boughs are fairly worn between maybe some handholds, maybe some footholds. This tree's got an awful lot of good spots to grab onto. And then why don't each of you make me we'll say it's a difficulty 4 perception-based roll. You can tell me how you might want to deal with this challenge. There's something here you might be able to pick up on.
Is it invisible, insubstantial, or hidden via magic?
No.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Figured I'd ask.
Can I use my sensing danger for this one then? As a perception?
It's not directly affecting you, or it's not something that is considered dangerous in and of its own self.
I'm just trying to figure out exactly what it is we would roll for that. Would that be intellect?
Well, again, so and the important thing to understand about the system is that you're not technically rolling intellect.
Oh, yeah.
Intellect's a pool of points which can be used to help overcome challenges.
Okay, so if I rolled under on something and wanted to make it meet, I would be able to spend up to it?
Yeah, so why don't we talk a little bit about the way effort works? Because I think that it's important to sort of lay ourselves a bit in the system. So your pool is really the most basic measurement of a stat. When you're injured, when you're sickened or attacked, you temporarily lose points from that pool. So your character may have a really high intellect pool. And what it basically means is that Clara is very willful. She has a very strong will. And so she can take an awful lot of mental assault before she breaks down or has to, incur penalties or that sort of thing. So the same thing is true basically of any other pool. So if a character has a really high speed pool, it means that they sort of don't tire. They're always fast. There's a little bit of similarities between some of the pools, like might and speed. There are some things where you could see they sort of share certain attributes. And then you have edge. And so when something requires you to spend points from a stat pool, your edge is going to reduce the cost. So if you have an ability that requires you to spend intellect, but you have an edge of 1 in your intellect pool, you deduct that 1 from whatever the cost is. Okay. And you can have multiple edges in multiple different pools as the character develops. And then you have effort, right? So when you really need to accomplish something, you can spend effort. So for a beginning character like you're all playing here, applying effort requires spending 3 points from a stat pool towards the appropriate action. So for this one, because it's a perception-based challenge, you could spend 3 points out of your pool to lower the difficulty by 1, right, for that challenge. So you could take it from a 4 to a 3. You can also use that in the same conjunction with assets. So you can use equipment, right? So the traditional sort of example that is used a lot is the climbing example, which is we have a mountain we have to climb, and it's a difficulty 4 challenge. And so the person climbing says, well, I'm going to spend 3 points from my pool, and I'm going to drop that from a 4 to a 3, and I'm going to declare that this rope and all these pulleys are my assets, and so it's going to drop it from a 3 to a 2, and then I'm going to roll versus a 6 rather than a 12. So that's how I've made this so much easier. Does that help make sense?
Yes, that helps a lot. Thank you.
But if we don't have a perception-based skill, can we roll?
Certainly.
Does that make does that make it harder then?
It just doesn't lower the challenge rating, right? So if you had a perception skill, you could say, well, I'm trained in perception, or I'm trained in finding things, not finding, but finding things, because of course this is the Appalachian countryside. You could do that and then apply that skill and say, okay, well, I'm trained in this, so it's going to be easier for me.
So, for example, Michael, my character is perceptive and has a skill specifically that's an eye for detail, and I'm trained in any task that involves noticing little things.
Ooh.
Noticing small details is literally a thing I'm trained in. Would that help in this circumstance?
Absolutely. So your roll is going to be, your difficulty is going to be basically one level less.
Okay.
So instead of rolling against a 12, you're going to roll against a 9.
So I'd like to also spend 3 points of my intellect pool.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Do you have an edge in your intellect pool?
I do.
Okay, so you're going to spend 2 rather than 3 because it costs you less.
So I'll spend 2 intellect points.
Yeah, you get that
full
benefit.
Points, and I'll also be using that skill, that training and finding details.
I love it. And again, anybody can participate in this. So
Yeah, can I use my focus and become a fox? Because you can roll perception as a fox.
I'm not here to stop you from being a fox, okay? That is who you are as a person. If you want to turn into a cute little fox, Elijah, you go right ahead.
I will, and I have to spend 3 intellect points to do so.
Fabulous. So I would love, if you would, Morgan, please explain how Elijah transforms into a fox.
Sure. So I don't say anything to Clara and Ivy before I do this, but all of a sudden you start seeing like me shake, and it just gets smaller and smaller, and my, into my clothes. You know how you're gonna disappear, and you're getting hopefully there's no copyright, but like Ant-Man, he gets smaller and smaller. Okay. And I disappear into my clothes, but there's still a lump there, like a long lump. And you see this like fluffy, does Tennessee have red foxes or whatever?
Our Tennessee can, sure.
All right. So you see this fluffy, like orangish red tail pop out from one of the pant legs. And it shakes, and there's this head pops out with these big, cute, fluffy ears, and white chest and a nose. And I just, I sneeze, as you do. Look at Ivy and Clara and make one of those laughing fox noises.
Yeah, I would love to know how Clara and Ivy are responding to Elijah, who is now Fox cousin.
I have so many words to fight right now. There's so many words I'll try to escape at once, and I gotta fight all of them. I've seen a lot of things. There are a lot of things that I've witnessed in the holler I'm from, with the granny who raised me. Little red foxy tailed preacher man, though. Not something that I've ever had the pleasure of being exposed to before. Hey, Clara, as Ivy's just sort of swatting at Clara's arm while staring at the fox in the preacher's clothes the whole time, just not looking away, but just frantically sort of batting at her friend.
Clara is standing there as soon as she sees him starting to convulse, her eyes narrow. They squint like they did before. And then she stands with her arms akimbo out on her hips and feels every single swat that Ivy does not react in. And when that tail pops out, just finally goes, huh. She knew something was up with Elijah. She knows of the help that he's seeking. And just was waiting, was not expecting this to be the time to see it all in action. And she is both curious and pleased as punch at the same time. And as concerned as Ivy is being, Clara has more surprise.
Not so much concerned as surprised and trying to not boop its nose, because that feels disrespectful to this preacher man that I just met. And
Clara is just sitting there, just kind of grinning, looking back and forth between them. It's like, all right, Brother Fox.
Cousin, preacher, fox, cousin, preacher, cousin,
whatever.
fox.
Hey, go
preacher.
Look for what you're looking for. We ain't got time.
Okay, so Elijah and Ivy, if you'd like to make your perception rolls, go ahead.
I got a 13 on my d20, so
Fabulous. You pass.
I mean, Clara's going to look around too.
Yeah.
But
Certainly.
yeah.
I got a 2. Preacher cousin Fox not finding anything.
I think you're probably just a little too busy being a fox. It sort of takes over your brain a little bit. And you're rolling around and you're making chatty fox noises, and you're really just not paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah, I'm bounding through the leaves.
Oh, yeah. What Clara get?
Clara got a 7.
Okay, so it looks like Ivy's the only one that's got a pass on that then.
would the fox still be drunk?
Um,
Is that a drunk fox playing in those leaves?
I think so. I think it's fair
Kind
to
of
say.
like the ones when they eat the little, like, the little fermented persimmons or crab apples.
Yep, you bet.
Okay.
He's all, that's why he couldn't find anything. He was off trying to find a crab apple tree.
Got it. All right. Well,
And then you think maybe you see that the fox is trying to get the flask open. It's not going very well, but
It's on the ground, like, "Arr."
Ivy, what you detect is rather interesting. This tree has some very intricate marks that have been placed into the bark
okay.
all the way up.
Oh,
As far as you can see, there are rows of symbols that have been just over time carved into this tree. And they're not so deep that you would pick them up in probably the daylight. They are hidden in sort of the different patches and spaces here within the tree. But these are definitely irregular markings. They're strange symbols.
I would like to take my journal and drawing implements that I carry with me and mark some of them down. If I don't recognize any of them myself, then Claire's granny might. So,
It's a good idea. As for Charlotte, you don't see her here.
what?
You don't see Charlotte in the tree. So
Oh, okay. That's fair.
Is there any evidence of recent activity around the tree? Footprints, anything, any sort of direction for where folks may have walked in recent time?
around the base of the tree, there are some marks in the mud and whatnot, but nothing that grabs you specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are probably marks that have shoes, and then some of them are definitely look like little kid feet that have been put in the mud. Like, that's a heel.
Mm-hmm.
You know what that looks like. That's a kid's heel.
Mm-hmm. Is that going off in a particular direction?
Yeah, south.
Okay, so probably down towards the factory.
Clara, if you don't mind, I want to jot these down. There are these symbols in the tree, and I'll try to move the lantern to show Clara what I'm looking at, the markings.
Oh, look at that. Is there any way that I can kind of take a look at that and see if I can recognize any of these symbols?
You have a skill in magic, right?
Oh, yes, I do.
Which one do you of them?
I have understanding, using, and crafting.
Okay, so yeah, you can roll based on understanding. So this is, we'll say, a difficulty 5 roll. You'll be able to reduce that being trained in understanding magic to 4. But this is a fairly intricate working.
Okay. Just trying to see if there's anything else I can throw on top of that.
You could potentially spend pool points from intellect.
Okay.
And if your edge is in intellect, you could spend 2 extra points to drop it to a challenge rating 3, which is a difficulty a total of 9 on your d20. So it's basically a little bit better than a 50-50 roll.
Okay.
This is a fairly involved challenge.
Oh, absolutely. So I think that she would do that. Would my mystic sense help reduce the difficulty of this? Whether something mystical or magical is going on where its presence is not obvious. You must study the object or location closely for a minute to get a feel for whether a mystical touch is at work.
Not at this point.
Okay, so this would be truly just a knowledge-based roll.
Yep.
Okay, I will... Because my rolls are kind of quickly going downhill. I will go ahead and spend how many intellect points would that be to reduce it?
So if you have a 1 in your intellect edge, so it'd be 2 points.
So take it down by 2 points. And then that makes my difficulty 3, so that I would have a total of 9 that I gotta beat. Let's see. Oh, wait. No, that's a 6, not a 9. Doggone it.
Yeah, so I'll give you this little bits of information. You're fairly certain that this is some sort of protective ward. You don't really know who put it here or what the intent it was to protect from. It could very well be something as simple as maybe someone like your gran decided that they really loved this tree and they didn't ever want it cut down. And so it might not be something that physically protects the tree from being cut down, but it may be sort of that thing where, well, people just sort of don't think about that when they're around here. It doesn't really ever come to mind that this tree should be cut down. But you're not real certain because you can't figure out what these lines mean. What are they trying to imply? Maybe I'll have to talk to Grant about it.
How's it coming along, marking them all down?
Well, I can't put heads or tails of them, but it does seem like these were purposefully put here. They were meant to ward it, to protect it. Probably the reason why the tree's still here.
Well, I've been drawing them all down so that I can ask Granny about the ones that I don't recognize. So,
good.
We can talk about it.
As she's doing that, I would like to kind of take a look around the tree, particularly to see if there's any kind of bird life that may have been happening around here. Birds, feathers, any sort of materials that might, with this being a special tree, not sure what kind yet, I would like to see if there are any sort of materials there that could be used in future craftings of mine.
So there are a couple of black feathers that are at the bottom of this tree. And they are big. They're pretty large. I'd probably say that as you get around into the ground grasses that are still in some portions of this tree, you probably find a couple of brown or brown-black feathers that are maybe 12 to 14 inches long.
Would I be able to identify what kind of birds dropped these?
You'd probably have to have a skill that would allow you to do something like that.
I have Supply Finder. You are trained in finding and identifying crafting materials, including herbs, animal parts, magical items, etc. As a part of Craft's as part of Craft's powerful objects as my focus.
I like that. Okay, so I'll give you a roll. We'll say that it's difficulty 3, so it's 9 or better. You're trained, so that'll be 6 or better because it'll drop the difficulty number. But you may not like what you find out.
I got a 6, so is it meets beats?
Meets beats. So these 2 feathers are, you know what they are right away, and it makes you real concerned. These feathers, if you didn't know it any better, come right off a snallygaster.
A what?
A snallygaster. Legends say that these creatures are sort of a mix of bird and reptile. Hard scales, metallic beak, razor-sharp teeth, and then wings and talons. There's even tales you've heard that they're covered in these octopus-like tentacles that grow from the lower portion of its body. Larger specimens have been known to carry off grown men. But with these feathers, you might be able to make a fairly useful potion if you distill it just right.
Well, and she takes the feathers. She just out of instinct looks up, her eyes pretty concerned, and just glancing along the top boughs just in case. Nothing up there, hoping.
No, it is awful dark out here.
All right. Okay, well, I've got these, and she picks them up, and she says, we should get on out of here, especially you, and points at the fox.
Pastor Cousin Fox.
Pastor Cousin Fox, yes.
Yeah, I jump in the cart and look at my clothes on the ground pointedly with my snoot.
Clara just raises a brow with a little bit of a grin.
Okay. The three of you head south towards the steel mill. And I think for the moment, that is a perfect place to end this episode. So we want to thank you for joining us on this episode of Old Gods of Appalachia, as next time, the search for Charlotte continues. Thanks, and be safe.